Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm Tom Hannafin. He's Justin King. Today, we're diving into some recent comments by a variety of members of Penn State's coaching staff: James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, Justin Lustig, the special teams coordinator, and especially a very curious comment by offensive line coach Phil Trautwein, and more. A lot of stuff that we can dissect from this past weekend, the media availability for the coaches and the players going through that proverbial car wash. Training camp continues as we get closer and closer to kickoff against Nevada on August 30th. Penn State currently 45.5-point favorites over the Wolfpack. So we're looking forward to that game getting started and kicking off this season. I think we're all dying for it. James Franklin kind of kicked off the festivities this past weekend. And, Justin, you and I were talking yesterday about the expectations and people asking the coaches and players about a national championship run. And James Franklin was very, very smart to not go directly to that and say, yes, our goal is to win the national championship this year. He did point out that it's great to have additions to the coaching staff like Jim Knowles and Stan Drayton as coaches with head coaching experience and national championship experience. So he's always very good about, I'm going to point that out. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but he's like, I'm going to point it out. But he said, quote, I don't really feel like the expectations have changed. They're always high. 99% of the programs in the country would be jacked to be a drive away from the national championship game. And people were pissed when that happened last year for Penn State versus Notre Dame. He went on to say, no one cares about preseason rankings. Penn State is currently third in the coaches poll. James Franklin said, we're focused on what we have to do to have the type of season that we want to have. I love reading between the lines of James Franklin. It's one of my favorite things. What do you interpret from all that?
I mean, it was pretty clear, right? And just the sense of, like, again, it's a message to the players, like, don't get too big-headed with people thinking that we're going to be good. And he's right. I mean, preseason rankings do not matter. There's a lot of teams that start off in the top 5 and end up out of the top 25 at the end of the season. So, I mean, the message, I think, is clear. We're trying to keep that 1-0 mentality on the forefront, even though the elephant in the room is that everyone's expecting them to go deep into the playoffs.
Penn State currently the 4th best odds to win the national championship this year, according to FanDuel, plus 700 at this point in time. So we'll see if that continues to move. One of my favorite little nuggets from this past weekend from James Franklin is that it's kind of you just kind of said it off the cuff. Quote, hopefully this is the last time Jim Knowles installs a defense. Could this be the last stop for Jim Knowles in his illustrious career in college football?
He's been putting it in the work. I mean, he's got national championships under his table, and he's a career defensive coordinator. I think that's a nice plea to get him to lock in and finish strong with Penn State and bring that national championship to us.
It's the thing, the churn of coordinators and position coaches, especially in college football. It's so normal, and I know you understand that from years in the sport. But, it's been a minute since Penn State has been able to have a consistent presence at either coordinator spot, guys who are going to stay for beyond 2 to 3 seasons, because that's really kind of the norm. And even one season, guys hop in and bounce immediately. But to have a guy like Jim Knowles, who's got such ability and has the track record, the resume, clearly the respect of his fellow coaches. Andy Kotelnicki calls him Professor Knowles. We heard a bunch this weekend. That would be incredible if this was the last stop for Jim Knowles in his career. Older gentleman, not trying to say that he's, done anytime soon or anything. He's extremely sharp when you hear him talk, and he knows exactly what he's doing. So it's not a fear of like, he's maybe got a year or 2 left because he's ready to hit a retirement home. It's not something like that. It's just like, man, if Penn State was so lucky to have him beyond what his 3-year contract states, that would be incredible. But I don't know. It's that thing where it's a pie in the sky situation, Justin. But do you think those long-term coordinator tenures are necessary anymore in college football?
Necessary? Not really, but I think it's the best job in the business.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's beneficial when you have a defensive coordinator that wants to be a defensive coordinator, or offensive coordinator that wants to be offensive coordinator. You can have stability and build around it anybody that gets cemented in their roles and a level of stacking that knowledge with your players and program, I think has sustainable success. But business that has a lot of churn, it's hard to accomplish when there's suitors for high performing coaches or high performing players.
James Franklin discussed the backup quarterback situation. He said, quote, "I think that competition is going to go right down to the wire. It could continue throughout the year. Whoever has the best week, they're going to be the backup quarterback, potentially. We'll see. If it's close this season, it could go into next year." The consensus seems to be the battle is between Ethan Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smolik. When you hear that battle could be a week-to-week thing in 2025 and could go all the way up until week 0 of 2026, how do you feel about that?
Man, creating a situation where there's competition or an environment where there's competition, and also forecasting that, expect competition. And I think that's the Penn State way since James Franklin's been there. I mean, just a competitive environment in general, but that's what I think he's laying the groundwork for.
It's also the luxury of having freaking Drew Aller as your starting quarterback. It's like, hey, there's really no question at 1. And behind Aller, you want to feel comfortable and confident that if Aller were to sustain an injury, or hell, his helmet pops off and he has to come off the field or whatever, that the guy who goes in there is going to be competent and you're not going to miss too much in terms of the offensive continuity. So you're hoping Grunkemeyer and or Smolik are able to come in there and play at a high level. But I'm really okay with this being a long-term audition, and it's not something that just started now. Like, let's not pretend that this wasn't going on during the 2024 season. And granted, Jackson Smolik was out due to injury and has impressed the coaching staff that Smolik came off of an injury and picked up right where he left off, or if not better, and has not fallen behind Ethan Grunkemeyer, and that those two are neck and neck, so to speak. So I'm very curious to see how that progresses. We'll learn a decent amount about backup quarterback in the first 3 games of the year, non-con games. No disrespect to those teams, but you should see a lot of the 2s and 3s, and James Franklin said as much. Also, Franklin talked about the offensive line. I thought this was fascinating because, again, you were obviously a part of this program in the mid-2000s, and the turmoil and change that occurred in 2011, 2012, and then you being a part of the recruiting staff in 2017. Franklin talked about, he's like, when I got here, we had 4 offensive linemen. 4. He said, now we're at 22 or 25, something like that. There's tremendous competition, specifically at right tackle that was brought up. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. Anthony Donko and Nolan Rucci both played at right tackle, and there's a question of, was Sal Wormley off to the NFL? Could one of those guys move inside to guard? Is that a guy like Cooper Cousins? He said, there's young guys. We've worked hard at creating position flexibility. How do we get the best 5 guys on the field? And then how do we create depth? And he said that about a lot of different positions, Justin. So what is that task really like from your previous experience of getting the best 5 guys on the field and creating depth simultaneously?
It's the hardest thing to do in the team building of football, is finding a depth of offensive linemen and the requisite height, weight, speed, athleticism of those big guys. I mean, God just doesn't make that many people that are that big and athletic. So I always had a philosophy like collect big guys. And then it's when you find that coach that can mold them the right way and identify the guys that are big, fast, athletic, and have a mean streak to him. Someone like a Phil Trautwein that's been there and seen it up close and personal when he was at his days in Florida. We played together in the NFL, and knowing exactly what it looks like and being able to craft that and connect it to the recruiting process is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. Even just a story flashback to when I was at the XFL and we're building that league out. The hardest thing about spring football is finding offensive linemen that can not only play and just have the requisite skills for an individual, but 5 guys that can pick up blitzes, coaching, and understanding that whole process within 2 to 3 months before they play. And that's just, it's a very, very intricate position that requires a lot of intelligence and just physical gifts that are rare in the world. So it's a very tall task. And I mean, Phil Trautwein and Penn State has done a great job with that over the past 5-7 years.
a tremendous job to go from 4 scholarship offensive linemen, which sounds like, what are you going to do? You're asking guys off the street to come in and play offensive line. That's really what James Franklin inherited in 2014, like, make no bones about it. And now being at 22, 25, and you've got reasonably 8 to 9 offensive linemen that Penn State's like, yeah, we feel like we can put them out there and they could be starters. Like that's a tremendous level of comfort, and a lot of it is thanks to offensive line coach Phil Trautwein. And I mentioned it here at the top of the show. I mentioned it yesterday. Phil Trautwein had a tremendous thing to say about Penn State. I believe it was this past offseason, there was a rumbling or rumor that he could be departing for the offensive coordinator job at Ohio State. Phil Trautwein said this past weekend, quote, "I love Penn State. I don't see myself leaving for any other college football job." You know this better than anybody. You've had multiple jobs and roles and opportunities in this sport on the field and off the field. To put that out there is huge. That is a monumental thing to say, because there is just so much change, so much turnover, people bouncing around from town to town, program to program, that sort of stuff. For Phil Trautwein to put that out there is monumental. What do you think?
I think it's big. But the first thing I heard was like, well, he's an NFL coach anyway. Like, if you get around him. So when he said that, I think it was like,
oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, when I heard it, I was like, I mean, if you're not going to lose me to another college, but you may lose me to a Sunday team. Like, that's me. I mean, that's
a great point. I was feeling all warm and fuzzy about this until I talked to you.
I mean, he's he's an NFL type of coach. So when he said that, I was always like, oh, he's telling you, like, if he's going to leave, he's going to the league. Which is not far-fetched to happen.
That's incredible. Speaking of the league, I must have missed this quote, or maybe we addressed it last year, but Phil Trautwein last year, when Cooper Cousins got on campus, and Cooper Cousins had a great freshman campaign and has the potential to do a lot with this offensive line in 2025. He compared Cousins' skill set to the Pouncey brothers. Phil Trautwein, having played offensive line at Florida with the famed Pouncey brothers, the Pounceys played extremely long careers in the National Football League, both supremely talented, made a ton of money, Pro Bowls, all that sort of stuff. When you hear that comparison, what do you think? And then also, like, what do you think of Cooper Cousins' game in general from what you've seen?
As a hell of a comparison, which is I mean, kudos to Cooper. He should feel great that someone that played with the Pouncey brothers is comparing him to those guys, elite interior linemen, center, guards, whatever, centers. But no, I was impressed by Cooper last year. I mean, I've seen him up at the spring practice. I mean, was the Hot Dave's Chicken? I think it was something we had the hood on. I was just like, from just his size as a freshman. Again, when we talk about that learning curve of being able to play as a skill position guy, we're talking about Darius Dixon. I think it's even more impressive for a freshman offensive lineman to be able to step in and be productive. So again, kudos to the development, whoever had him before he got to Penn State, and what he was able to do once he got here, because that's probably the hardest position to make an instant impact on. So if you do that as a freshman, the growth potential and the avenue of development is limitless, especially with a coach like Phil Trautwein if he doesn't go to the league.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Sticking with the offense here, and I do want to get to some comments by defensive coordinator Jim Knowles here in a little bit, but sticking with the coordinators, offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, echoing some of the things we were just saying moments ago. When you feel like you have 8 to 9 guys who can play at offensive line, we'll do whatever we have to do to move the football. Your imagination becomes the limitation, and I think that's the perfect way to describe what we saw from Andy Kotelnicki last year. Is I don't know if anybody had on their bingo card Vega Ioane going in motion often. But he's able to do those things. Talked about tight end Andrew Rappelier coming off an injury last year. He said we've had to hold Rappelier back, but I think there's a lot of expectations for him. And one subject that Andy Kotelnicki touched on that Penn State fans have been curious about for years, and there's been conspiracy theories aplenty. Andy Kotelnicki said, quote, "I don't feel micromanaged by James Franklin. He lets us coach, lets us do what we're hired to do." And he talked about how there are programs throughout the country where you could, for instance, be an offensive coordinator, position coach, and the head coach walks in and takes over the meeting and takes the clicker or something like that. Or you could be in the middle of a practice or hell, in a game in the middle of a drive, and they all of a sudden take over, something like that. And there have been Penn State fans who speculated that James Franklin has done that over the years, or that he has done that in game, sometimes to the detriment of Penn State football. I think that's why it's a conspiracy theory, and it's often a negative connotation. But from your experience, did you think that James Franklin was a micromanager?
No, I don't think he was a micromanager, but I also believe that he's like on top of his shit, like of everything. Like, so like, well, I mean, like, yeah, you have to be in that type of organization. So I mean, like, again, I always tell people that, and from my experience, like working there is like going to like a master's program or a doctorate program and working in operations, just based on how he wants things ran. So just from working with him and then going to other places, whether it's working for Vince, Oliver Luck, Doug Whaley, and different things of that nature, it was a lot easier. Or it was like, or I was just in step of what they expected based on how he wants things presented. He's just very particular in his ways. I wouldn't say micromanaging, but staying on top of what you need to stay on top of. And there's a lot of critical factors in a football program that you need to have hands on. But speaking to the micromanaging of a coach, I think that's a completely different situation. I think he does a great job hiring coaches that he trusts and that can run their own room. When he says that head coach of their room and things of that nature, I think that's into his philosophy. But I think any head coach that used to be a position coach is going to lean towards that position that they coached, right? So Andy Kotelnicki saying that, I would be interested to hear like Higgins say that, since James was a receivers coach, right? I mean, as a quarterback coach, I mean, he played quarterback, but he's a career receivers coach. And I mean, the same thing when I played with Spag, when he was the head coach for us at the Rams. Like he was in our DB rooms because he was the DB coach and defensive coordinator. Or like that was just what it is. Mike Tomlin, like he's with the receiver. Like you hear it at Alabama with Nick Saban, just throwing out those guys, zeroing in on those positions that they used to coach, because that's the one time that they really get to coach football, because you have that aerial view where you have to make sure everything is operating. But if something's going to be right, it's going to be my position that I'm typically that I've coached in the past. So I don't think Kotelnicki had a problem with that, but it'll be interested to see if, like the receivers coaches felt the same.
Yeah, position coaches. It can be a little bit different. And listen, the expectations for James Franklin and this team in 2025 are enormous, as we well know. According to FanDuel, the over-under for win totals for Penn State in the regular season is 10.5. And then on top of that, in terms of teams that are projected to win 11 regular season games, tied for first, Ohio State and Penn State, plus 105. And potential teams to go undefeated in the 2025 regular season, according to FanDuel, Penn State is at fourth, plus 450, behind only Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Clemson. So there are high expectations, high possibilities. You never know what can happen. So I think, especially this year, it's not a situation where I expect to see micromanaging or anything like that, but it is also hey, all the pressure is on you to tighten the screws and have everything be as close to perfect as it possibly can be, and that falls on the head coach. I want to wind down here on Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator, because I mentioned, hopefully, according to James Franklin, this is the last time that Jim Knowles has to install defense. So there's been that conversation out there for a while, Ohio State fans especially saying, Penn State's not going to have that good of a defense this year because it takes Jim Knowles 3 years to install his defense, and that's when you see results. So Knowles was asked about that, and he said, overall, you need to have answers for everything, particularly at this level. Offenses don't run the same things in college football. I have gotten better at teaching it, and I have to be. Our charge is to be great now. If it's too complicated or I can't get it installed in a way the players can't pick up quickly, that's my fault. I think I've developed a process that gets it installed at a more rapid pace. When you hear that, especially as someone who played on the defensive side of the ball, what do you think?
I mean, if he's talking about pace of play, I think he's not going to put too much on players to make them think, right? You get coaches that want to empower their players to read and react, give them a little bit of boundary so that they can play with a level of emotion. I think that's the major difference between an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator is that offensive coordinators are typically, very stringent, like hit this 5-yard mark. This has to be done this way. When you got defense, you're coaching a little bit of attitude, giving parameters on how to direct that attitude, and then coaching at the point of attack and different things of that nature to make sure that they're playing with their hair on fire. So it's a little bit different. So if he's trying to get to that point of playing fast with his hair on fire, it can't over what I'm saying, like give him too much information to
Right.
where it's like processing and, pat himself on the back, especially when you have confident defensive coordinators when they're not trying to prove themselves, right? Like, it's like, no, this is what I do. This is that. Now, when you have upcoming coordinators that are trying to prove their wits as a new coach, they might try to get a little too exotic where it makes guys slow down and think too much, but this guy's been around the block and had success. So I think if it's been 5 years in the past, I'm sure that it'll be much faster here.
Yeah, 3 years has been the speculation in the past, and especially for him saying our charge is for that to be now, for that to be immediate. It's like, yeah, Penn State, whether they say it or not, is in a win now mode. Win a national championship in 2025, not in 3 years.
Right.
Knowles also spoke about how injuries have delayed his player evaluation. Obviously, he was able to get on campus in the winter, and you still had some really critical players from this defense that were out due to injury from the 2024 season, more so recovering. Some guys had surgeries. And he said, I think we're in a good spot. They've responded to the installation without getting the reps. Tony Rojas, denied Ennis Sutton, Zane Durant, AJ Harris. It was definitely a concern, but so far, so good. From your experience dealing with injuries, being a starter, and something new being put in, what is the challenge of learning maybe a new scheme or going through the install process when you can't physically go through it and it all has to be between the ears?
Depends on how much contextual knowledge you have of football. I think it's hard for players that come up memorizing their own positions. Like, all right, I need to do this on this play. I need to do that on that play, or this set. I should be looking for this. But if you have like a contextual understanding of football, you start realizing once you understand the context, you can figure out what the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator is trying to accomplish. And once you have, the outcome goal, you can kind of use your creativity to play in that. But that takes a level of perspective on how you're learning the game of football. So the guys that have, deeper understanding or contextual knowledge of the game, I think it's pretty easy to pick up new concepts. But guys that are memorizers, sometimes you get stuck especially when you got a multi-look defense. Things shift based on the running back going to this side, different personnel, just to be able to cover these exotic offenses that are drawing things up in the sand based on how the defense looks. So you have to be able to react and think fast and process fast. One of the most underrated skills I think these guys in high-level college football don't get credit for is just the level of processing that you need to have to be successful.
Last thing here, before I forget, because we were asked about this in our YouTube comment section, so thank you to everybody that has become a member of our channel and has gotten ad-free shows. You can follow the link in the description of this podcast if you want to get all of our upcoming episodes without commercials, just 99 cents a month. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. As always, we appreciate it. Last thing here, special teams. Justin Lustig, special teams coordinator, had a lot to say. He also works with the defensive back, so I want to get to all this stuff really quickly. He said last year we didn't have a lot of answers in terms of kick return. This year we have a lot of answers. He said it's a deep room. Zion Tracy, Trebor Pena did the job at Syracuse. Devontae Ross did the job at Troy. He had also mentioned Tyseer Denmark, Josiah Brown, and Kobe Howard as guys who can contribute in terms of kick and or punt return. Says he thinks the position is really, really deep. And he said there's no big questions on special teams. We have depth at every position. Sets us up potentially for making major improvements. Also mentioned that Gabe Nwosu, who many people have seen be the what did you call it? The not place kicker, but kickoff specialist, I'll call it that way, is challenging Riley Thompson at punter. So there's an interesting development. I just mentioned Darius Dixon standing out. We talked about that yesterday here on State of State, how Jim Knowles likes Darius Dixon, but Dixon is somebody who could contribute on special teams. Lustig said we're really deep at corner, but he's a guy who's going to have a chance to get on the field early on special teams. Is he somebody who gets his red shirt burned? We're going to have to see. And he talked about a lot of confidence in Quentin Martin Jr. and Corey Smith, running backs at kick return. So I think there's just a situation where the cup runneth over in terms of returners. And then he mentioned defensive backs, Justin Lustig, as I mentioned, working with the nickel position, specifically said Zion Tracy's been running with the ones, but also Colin Dinkins and Kenny Wosley Jr. are guys who can do everything. So some interesting tidbits there. Obviously, Ryan Barker, who had a very nice season last year at place kicker. You kind of understand what you're getting there in that position. A battle at punter, and a lot of different options in terms of kick and punt return that I, for one, am very curious to see. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on that situation with special teams. Again, hop in the comments section. Let us know how you guys are feeling about all of these comments from the coaching staff and how things are progressing here in training camp. And we'll continue to cover all of this here on State of State, presented by FanDuel. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.